Doomsday Cult Mom, Lori Vallow-Daybell, right? As if this story couldn't get more complicated, it will for you get more complicated tonight. And what I'm talking about, Lori Vallow, you know all about her, 2 missing kids, 3 dead bodies. She has a niece, and her niece, like her Aunt Lori, was in a bitter divorce situation. And in that case, her husband, Brandon Boudreaux, claims that someone shot at him. Okay, what is going on in this world? Ted Rowland spoke with an investigator looking at the case to get more information.
Brandon Boudreaux and his wife Melani seem to be happily married, raising their children, when Brandon says Melani started going down a very dark path based on the religious beliefs she shared with her aunt, Lori Vallow.
Their focus is just so much on the end of the world, and you know, this idea that it's coming just makes you sad. You know, like a lot of people you care about aren't here anymore because of these ideas.
That's Brandon last year talking to Fox 13 in Salt Lake. He is now in hiding, according to his private investigator, Rich Robertson.
He has to be very concerned about what the implications are for him and his kids.
Robertson said at first Brandon didn't think much about Melani and Lori Vallow's fascination with Chad Daybell and his beliefs about the end of the world.
But it did seem to start getting more and more extreme as Melani started making statements about Brandon and how he was being possessed by outside forces, and that she attributed a lot of things, started seeing him as an evil person.
Brandon and Melani ended up getting divorced, and then on October 2nd.
911, where's your emergency?
Someone just shot my window.
Did you see the guy that
I didn't see who it was.
Brandon had dropped off his kids, and he was coming back from the gym to his house. And as he pulled up to his house, he was still kind of in the street. And as he pulled up to the curb, a shot came from a nearby Jeep that was parked on the opposite side of the street.
The bullet hit Brandon's Tesla, missing his head by a few inches. The shooter's Jeep, with Texas plates, was registered to Lori Vallow's ex-husband, Charles, who, at the time, had been dead for more than 2 months, shot and killed by Lori's brother, Alex Cox. Brandon says he didn't get a good look at the shooter, but believes he knows who it was.
He believes that Alex Cox was the person who fired that shot. And he knew that Alex Cox was kind of the family hitman. And he just fairly quickly came to the conclusion that it was Alex Cox.
A few weeks after the attempt on Brandon's life, Melani moved out of her home. Alex Cox was there with a U-Haul, helping her move. Melani left behind her children's toys and bedding, leaving the children with Brandon. Melani is now remarried and fighting for partial custody of her children. She claims she didn't have anything to do with the attempt on Brandon's life or what happened to Lori Vallow's missing children, Tylee and JJ.
Does Brandon believe that Melani knows what happened or where Tylee and JJ are?
Brandon doesn't know what Melani knows. I mean, he has his suspicions. He is wondering if she was a conspirator in the whole thing.
Melani's lawyers say she is cooperating with investigators, and while she certainly likes her Aunt Lori, she doesn't know what happened to Tylee and JJ.
Melani is very fond of her aunt. Her fondness for her aunt has, I'm sure, very little to do with her religious beliefs, but more to do with the kind of person that she thinks she is.
Brandon, who was very close to Lori and Charles, actually baptized Tylee. He's now worried about the children.
I spent the last 11 years of my life spending time with Lori and her now deceased husband, Charles. I don't know why they're doing what they're doing. It doesn't make any sense. I don't know what happened to those kids. I know that there's people who do and they're not talking.
This is unreal. I mean, just when you thought it couldn't get more complicated and strange, it absolutely is. Let's bring back in Ashley, Julie, and Ted. Ted, first thing, I saw Melani was in a courtroom, not for criminal cases, no charges here, right?
No, she was making an appearance. She is in a battle with Brandon over the kids. At one point, she was going to go live with Lori and Chad up in Rexburg and Alex and left the kids, but now she wants them. So they are in a bitter custody battle. As you can imagine, after all that has happened, Brandon is very concerned about his 3 children, even though Melani says that she and Lori Vallow have split.
Yeah, all right, Ashley, just a reaction to what we just experienced, what Ted just threw at us here with this story. I mean, this is unreal.
So my reaction is kind of the same as everything Ted reports, which is, are you kidding me? You know, I don't know where you get this stuff, but you are very, very good at what you do, Ted Rollins. But I do have to couch this all in the fact that there is a bitter, as Ted reported, custody battle and a divorce. So you have to understand that when you look at court documents and you see allegations, they are that. They are allegations. And so while I feel for the Boudreaux and I feel for Brandon Boudreaux, and certainly I feel for him, he was shot at, for God's sake, I also have to recognize that you can't always, I mean, you got to look at it all with a grain of salt when there's a custody dispute and a divorce proceeding. And that said, Vinnie Politan, there is some credibility that Mr. Boudreaux brings along with him, because in some of those documents, he alleges that, follow the bouncing ball here, because it's hard. Melani's new husband, I think you pronounce his last name, Pawlowski, Robert Pawlowski, Brandon says that he once told Brandon that Melani had actually said these words, ready? Sometimes children are full of light, and then just like that, they go dark. Now that's what Brandon says. However, there is reporting that says that Robert Pawlowski also corroborated that to police. So that's a very unusual statement to make, certainly in light of everything that we're looking at in this case. That is a very unusual statement to make. But that is the allegation that Brandon is making against his ex-wife, Melani. And if you don't believe him because he's in a custody dispute or in a divorce proceeding an earlier proceeding, well, maybe you can at least believe the fact that police have said that the new husband has corroborated that. So it's interesting.
Yeah, Julie, the other thing, putting together pieces here and seeing patterns. Tammy Daybell, remember her Facebook post? She posted about someone shot at her when she was in her driveway. And now you've got someone else that's somehow connected to all this. There's another drive-by shooting. I mean, can one set of people be subjected to all these deaths and gunshots coincidentally?
You know, that's a great question, Vinny. I'm so glad you brought it back to that, because you're right. And to Ashley's point earlier, which is excellent, we can't look at these facts just in a vacuum. The big picture here, we've got these 3 unsolved deaths, really. And now with what Brandon Boudreaux is claiming, there was this also attempted homicide or perhaps a murder for hire plot that's still unsolved. So it'd be really nice to know where investigators are in that case. And was there an MO here? Was there a pattern of killing here? And is the killer dead? Was that killer murdered? I mean, this is as twisted and convoluted and sick and sinister a case as it gets. And I think the saddest part is that the people closest to those children are unwilling to cooperate and making this even more difficult for investigators. And so, you know, who knows who's telling the truth? If it's Brandon, Melani, perhaps both, the new husband, Mr. Pawlowski. But if someone does have information and is not sharing that with police, shame on them. And when their judgment day comes, whether it's on the doomsday they believe in or whenever that day comes, they're going to have to be able to sleep at night and perhaps answer to a higher power. And I certainly hope answer to the feds and the state officials real soon if they had any part in these children's disappearance.
Well, let's talk about JJ and Tylee, because Ted asked Rich Robertson about that and whether or not Melani knows, because Melani's in that world, right? Melani moves with the kids and with Lori up to Idaho for some amount of time. Here's what he said.
Where the kids are, where JJ and Tylee are, or what happened to them. So she denies any involvement, and she doesn't quite understand why Lori Vallow hasn't produced them. At least that's kind of the public position on it. Clearly, there's a lot of questions raised about what she knew, when she knew it, whether or not she's being completely forthright about it, or was just maybe blind to it all.
You know, Ted, Melanie and her aunt seemed to be very close and I guess had this shared belief. And Melanie now cooperating with police. And a lot of people thinking, well, maybe that's where the lead comes from, but it doesn't sound like that.
Yeah, and that's, cooperating. Is she cooperating? She's saying that she had nothing to do with it. But if you listen to the stories of these husbands that were married to the Melanie and then Lori, they're so uniquely similar in that everything's going fine. Charles Vallow said the same thing, great wife, having a great life, and then all of a sudden they start to take this turn after meeting Mr. Daybell, and they changed. They now are accusing their husbands of being evil. Same thing happened to Brandon Boudreaux. It's just amazing the power that apparently Chad Daybell has. So does it make sense that Melanie doesn't know anything? And at what point was she removed from this equation? Because you're right, she went to Rexburg to live with Lori Vallow and Alex Cox.
And Alex Cox, Ashley, to me, was the key to this whole thing, right? We know that he shot at least one person to death, Charles Vallow. That he admitted on the spot. We see it on body cam, right? But he's dead now. And that death Ted's is going to take a look at that one for us, too. I know he's going to be doing that very soon. But that's a difficult one for investigators here because he was the one that maybe would have been able to give some knowledge as to where these kids are or if something happened to them. But he died too.
Yes, Vinny. And we all know that dead men don't tell tales, or do they? Because the truth is, Alex Cox has a bit of a history, and those pesky court records and convictions, they don't go away. And as it turns out, Alex Cox actually got into quite a scuffle with another one of Lori's ex-husbands. Another one of Lori's ex-husbands who ended up dead. 2 dead husbands in 2 years. And that other husband's name is Joseph Ryan. And it turns out 10 years before Joseph Ryan died, he got into a massive one-on-one with one Alex Cox. And Alex Cox was convicted of assault in that incident. So there's a lot to Alex Cox's actions, his volatility, shall we say. But can Alex Cox be put under oath right now and be put on a stand, or at least be squeezed by investigators to tell some truths? Sadly, no.